What is going on, Governors? Chisgule here, and today we're going to review our legendary tier list where we evaluate every single legendary commander in Rise of Kingdoms and give them a relative grading so you know which ones are best for every single activity in Rise of Kingdoms. Hello my friends and welcome back. This is a Season 4 Kingdom vs. Kingdom tier list where we're evaluating the effectiveness of commanders as they were in Season 4 of Kingdom vs. Kingdom and where they might be into the future. If you like Rise of Kingdoms guides that help you get value and smash your enemies, consider smashing the subscribe button for daily Rise of Kingdoms videos. We are also a sponsored content creator. Now, let's talk about the tier list. When we evaluate commanders, we go way in depth on all of the different things that you use those commanders for in Rise of Kingdoms. Those different activities include defending your city, battling against barbarians, battling in the open field, rallying objectives, defending objectives, and last but not least, Sunset Canyon. Now, we are going to rate them on a scale that goes as follows. S equals super powerful, the best of the best. A is for awesome. B is for you could do better, but they're pretty good. And then C, I mean, you really could do a lot better than a C rating. Now, we use a plus and a minus to differentiate the ones that stand out in that category and the ones that are maybe a little weaker relative to the others. Because although I could slap a whole bunch of commanders into the A tier or the S tier or whatever, it's really hard to know the difference between them, and we look at the intricacies to tell you which we think have extra edge so that you can enjoy that extra edge on the battlefield. At the very tail end of this video, we'll do an overall rating of all of the commanders so that you can get a sense of which ones are universally powerful in a bunch of different game modes, but you know that my general advice here is to pick a commander that's good in the categories that you most care about for yourself. Now, there will, of course, be timestamps in the description, so you can jump to whatever the heck most interests you. I would recommend that you do that. Oh, and P.S. there are two commanders that we're not going to include in this tier list because it would be pure speculation on how they will perform. However, I'll say that Theodora and also Yi Sun-sin, who just entered the game in Rise of Kingdoms, are likely to be meta commanders, S tier, for defending your city and maybe defending objectives as well. But that's probably about it. If you want to see more information about these two commanders, I've done about an hour worth of coverage over the last week or so, and I'll have links in the description if you want to go watch videos about these two commanders. Let's start with city defense. Now, as a public service announcement, when it comes to city defense, I just want to remind you that the unbeatable defense that you can use for your city is going to be a peace shield. Pop a peace shield, you don't take any deaths or any wounds or spend a single resource. Granted, you aren't going to kill any troops. So if you do want to use your troops and commanders to slay the enemy's troops at a great resource cost to you, you can do that. Here's the commanders that I think are the very best. In the S plus tier, we have left Wu Zetian. I'll tell you something. Wu Zetian is giving huge stat boosts to all of the different troop types that are contained within your city. That's siege units, infantry, archers, and cavalry. That's very, very, very powerful. I think that she is highly underrated, and if you were going to use the best defense in the game, I'd say that you use Wu Zetian as the secondary and Artemisia as the primary. If you use an Artemisia-Wu Zetian pairing, you are going to be slaying those enemies, and they are going to really struggle to keep up with your damage output. Continuing on through the list, I think that Charles Martel is still sitting pretty strong at an S-. We did slightly decrease his rating overall in order to account for the fact that we really do feel that Artemisia is the better defender. We left Yi-Song at an S because he is still super powerful, and an Artemisia-Yi-Song combination is going to be savaging multiple armies if they are around your city, or multiple rallies if you are getting multi-rallied. We did slightly decrease our evaluation of Richard I. We wanted to make sure it was really clear that we don't recommend him as highly as we do Charles Martel, who's now an S-, and Richard I is an A+. Moving on to our next category, Barbarians and Forts. Barbarians, this category really hasn't changed much at all. We have Minamoto as our S+, the most powerful choice you could use as a primary commander for battling Barbarians and Forts, and Cao Cao as a S. Very solid rating overall. We also have Yi-Song as an S because he can hit multiple targets, and you can basically have many things hit you without spending any action points at all. Free Barbarians is a pretty big win. Card up in the top if you haven't seen yet how to go and do that. We did slightly bump down our estimation of Ethelfled. We had her as an S. I think she's more like an S-. So this is really just a tweak. Nothing about her has actually changed. I just think that I slightly overrated her initially. Moving into our next category is open field combat. And this is where you will see the most change in the ratings from this time to the previous time that we evaluated commanders. Now, why is that? We spent an unbelievable amount of time battling in Altars of Darkness and Ancient Ruins. Card up in the top if you want to see what just one of those look like, but we have literally dozens of hours of footage of us doing that on the channel, which has given us a lot of time to experience these commanders and see which are the best of the best. So here is the list now. Noteworthy is that we still think that Alexander the Great is an S+, the very best you can bring to an open field combat. And we still feel that Alexander the Great deserves that title because he's giving not only yourself a shield, which gives your army durability, but he's also giving a nearby ally of yours a shield. You'll get no credit for that in your battle report, but someone in your alliance loves you for it. We also wanted to mention that, look, this debuff is extremely powerful. Most of this is not going to be represented in your battle report, where he is increasing the damage that other armies nearby are taking, but your allies will do better because of it. In addition, a ton of people are using Richard I in the open field, and Lead the Charge is just magnificent to deal with that. Reducing the healing of the enemy is a very powerful effect. Alexander the Great has that, and he's got 30% march speed to boot. I mean, he deserves the S+ title. However, we did bump up very high Attila and Takeda, which I did not expect. Attila and Takeda were monsters in the open field, and you can't use this commander to run into a big fight and eat a bunch of area of effect damage because you're not dishing any area of effect damage back out. The way you use Attila and Takeda is much more with surgical precision in an altar fight where you try to find folks that are on the edges, isolate individual marches, and do work against them. There's just enough march speed in this combination to be very powerful, including on Takeda, some extra speed occasionally having a chance to trigger, which was really nice. There's healing and sustain, which is really nice, and some amount of tankiness as well. This combo served me incredibly well. I also bumped up very highly in my rating. Richard I, who previously I had as an A+, I now give him a solid S. When you're fighting at the Altar of Darkness where, look, this is a fight where you can only bring one march at a time, the sustain that Richard I brings is real and meaningful. You stay in the fight a lot longer, and that means a lot in that style of combat. I actually had some of my most fun using Alexander the Great and Richard I together. They're a phenomenal pair, and I highly recommend that you use them. With all of that said, there were some commanders that I think I had overrated. The first commander I think I had overrated was Saladin. I used this commander, and I was not as happy as I thought I would be. I had thought that with this mobility talent right over here, I was really going to enjoy being able to get around the battlefield. It was good. It was not as good, though, as I thought it would be. People did use Saladin to great effect in the ruins, and I do think he's a great commander. I think he deserves an S-, but he's not quite S quality. In a similar vein, we felt that Guan Yu was really exceptional. I enjoyed using him. I even expertised him because I thought he was so good in the open field, but I still would give him an S-. You do enjoy some extra march speed when you leave a structure, which includes resource nodes. Very, very nice. He does have area of effect damage. The thing that he's really lacking is any sustain or tankiness at all, which does become a problem. In a similar vein, we slightly reduced our estimate of Leonidas. I think this commander could have been really awesome, but the problem is that, look, you get a nice effect here when you're below 50%. Well, guess what? You should not stay in the open field when you're below 50%. Why would you fight with 100,000 or 150,000 troops when your enemy has 300,000? It doesn't make any sense. Go home to your city, replenish your troops, which means some of this skill is basically wasted. The expertise skill is definitely wasted. This commander I overrated for his effectiveness. That said, you will get a little more bang for your buck, sort of, if you let your troop sit there until it completely dies and is defeated, but you really shouldn't do that even with Leonidas. In addition, we do feel that we need to reduce our rating of Ethelfled in the open field. She's a phenomenal commander, but if you try to use her as a primary, you're just going to get focused out. She doesn't have any tankiness at all. If you're going to use Ethelfled, consider using her as a secondary to a commander like Richard I. The downside there is you don't have any march speed, so if you get caught out, you're going to get wrecked. I reduced her rating, and I feel like A+ is more appropriate. In a similar vein, there are so many more options available to you these days for open field combat. I did need to reduce Minamoto to an A+. I also reduced Julius Caesar from an A+ to an A every time I saw a Julius Caesar in the open field. And, look, maybe this has to do with the people that were using them and the fact that they were lower power. But every time I saw a Julius Caesar, it got obliterated, melted, gone. There are much better combos that you can bring, and I wanted to make sure that that was represented. And previously, we had Cao Cao listed as an S, which is definitely an overly high rating. I reduced that to an S- because I'll tell you something about this commander as a primary. Nobody's going to catch you. Use the mobility tree, use this commander as the primary, and you will barely do any damage to anyone. And people will barely do any damage to you because they'll never catch you. So I think he does deserve his S- because he's still got a role killing gatherers. However, he's also very mobile if you are going to battle in the ancient ruins. And if you want to run around a lot rather than actually do a ton of fighting, Cao Cao is going to be really good to get away from combat, which, hey, that's going to save you on your hospital bill. That is a real benefit. It is worth mentioning that Ramses is a new entrant to this portion of the tier list, and I gave him a solid S. Ramses was very, very impressive, perhaps shockingly so, in the open field. All of his skills are relevant in that context, and in addition, he's got some healing, which goes such a long way for a prolonged fight at the Altar of Darkness or Ancient Ruins. I think he's very deserving of an S. And another commander that got added to this list but did not get a spectacular rating is going to be Artemisia. I gave Artemisia an A+. I do appreciate that she has area of effect damage, but she has no march speed whatsoever, and she also silences herself for a time, which could reduce your effectiveness on the battlefield because you're waiting for your skills to fire off, and sometimes that means the enemy gets away. And in addition, her active skill is doing damage to herself. This is the opposite of what you want in the open field. I talk about how it's great when a march has sustain. She has less sustain and more punch. I don't think that's what you want for a prolonged fight in the Altar of Darkness or Ancient Ruins. And I suppose if you're battling in the open field right outside your city, that could be okay, but I just didn't think she deserved better than an A+ for this category. Let's move on to the next category, which is going to be Rallying Cities. Rallying Cities is something that you will find yourself with rare occasion to do. However, if you were going to be in that position of rallying a city, I actually do still feel that Mehmed is arguably the very best commander in the game for this activity. He just has unbelievable amounts of extra damage to cities, and that extra damage is undeniable and powerful. I do feel, however, that there were a bunch of commanders that I had rated previously a little higher than either I should have, or that rating needs to be adjusted based on new entrants. Those new entrants are Artemisia, who I actually do not feel has a big role in this category. I gave her an A+, and Ramses, who I gave an S-. I think he's actually pretty solid. If you're going to be hitting a city, the attack tree is pretty good for that activity. With that said, I reduced the rating of Alexander the Great. I feel that Alexander the Great is good, but not deserving of the S, which he once held. I slightly reduced the rating of Guan Yu. I thought he would be better than I feel like he actually is for hitting cities. He does have extra damage to garrisons, that is good, but I was just not as impressed as I thought I would be. In a similar vein, I reduced the rating that I had for Charles Martel. There was a time where Alexander the Great and Charles Martel were a sick rally combo. That time has come and gone. That was Season 2 of Kingdom vs. Kingdom, in case you were wondering. I think that Charles Martel does bring a lot of nice counterattack, a lot of great infantry stats. However, I did not feel that he was deserving of better than an A+, which is where his rating sits now. If you're going to be rallying a city in Rise of Kingdoms, I recommend that you use Attila and Takeda as the tanking rally, because they have to be taking normal attack damage to deal back their counterattack damage, and that's how they do a lot of their damage. And then every other rally should be some high damage variant, including commanders like Mehmed II, to just completely obliterate the garrison, going all in on as much damage as possible. Let's move on to our next category, which is rallying objectives. This is a good one. I still feel that Attila and Takeda are the jam for rallying objectives, be it flags, forts, holy sites, whatever. If there are players occupying it other than a city, I do feel Attila Takeda is the best that you can do. And I am a little surprised that we find ourselves in yet another season of Kingdom vs. Kingdom where that is the case. Don't worry, they're extremely counterable, or at least you can find a great answer, and that's been that way for a while. We'll talk about that in the next section. For Attila and Takeda, I gave them the S+. I think they've earned it, they've had staying power, and they're very good. With that said, Ramses as a new entrant was very, very solid, and I gave him an S for rallying objectives. Now, the thing I want to mention about Ramses is that he works so well when your enemy is trying to counter Attila Takeda. Your enemy is going to use probably all infantry, because Charles Martel and Constantine is so good at least answering, if not beating, Attila Takeda. And the thing that really is going to kill Charles Martel and Constantine is Ramses with Yi Sun. For that reason, I actually bumped up the rating of Yi Sun a little bit, because I think he's better than I gave him credit for in the past for rallying things, especially since Ramses Yi Sun is a meta rallying pair. With that said, the majority of commanders I needed to bump down their rating for in order to account for the fact that Attila Takeda and Ramses Yi Sun were significantly better than everything else that we had tested or used. So with that said, we bumped down slightly the rating of Alexander the Great. As I mentioned before, he once was much better for rallying things than he is now. In a similar vein, for whatever reason, we had Richard I as an A+. I reduced that to just an A. We reduced Edward from an S to an S-. I think that his role as an archer rally leader is replaced by Ramses. And in a similar vein, we had slightly overestimated Guan Yu. We were not rallying with Guan Yu and Leonidas. I think that if you were going to rally infantry, that's what you should use, either Guan Leo or Guan Alex. And both of those combos we really did feel was a tier below the Ramses Yi Sun pairing. We did substantially reduce the rating we had for Khan. We had him at an S previously, and Khan we have reduced now to an A+. I think he's good. I don't think he's stupendous, however, for rallying objectives. I think you can do much better, and the aforementioned commanders will fill that role really nicely. Khan was really great in earlier seasons of KvK. This is not the role he fills now, and I'll say, for those of you who have Khan, he does still remain one of the absolute best commanders to use in the Soroli Assault and Soroli Crisis and Ian's Ballads. None of those are represented on this list. Let's move on to the next category, which is defending objectives. And this is a really interesting category because there's been some changes here. When we talk about defending objectives, we give now a new entrant the S+ title, and that is going to be Artemisia. We found that Artemisia with Wu Zetian was the very best Attila Takeda answer in Rise of Kingdoms, and we traded positive against Attila Takeda. Heck, we even traded positive getting double rallied by Attila Takeda, which is pretty sick. Artemisia with Wu Zetian is the jam, but we did have to slightly bump down our rating of Wu Zetian. She was S+ before. I don't think she is S+ now. I think that is truly deserved by Artemisia. And in a similar vein, Yi Song retains his S+ title for defending objectives, because look, that area of effect damage makes it so that the enemy troops cannot be near the flag. It controls the field, and that's a powerful effect. If the enemies do sit in the field and they eat that area of effect damage, they're taking dead troops, even if they aren't attacking it. Super savage. With regard to defending objectives, we did slightly bump up Charles Martel. Charles Martel primary with Constantine secondary was totally beast in answering or beating Attila Takeda. Charles Martel is a commander that, I don't know, I think people are sleeping on him a little bit here, or at least have been as the primary for defending against Attila Takeda. You do this right, and that combo is going to go even at best. I sort of wish that for this KvK, I had even gone in my Constantine sooner so that I could have used that combo, but I do feel that he is deserving of the S. Constantine retains the S title, and I bumped down slightly Richard I from an S to an S-. Now, Richard I really only deserved his S for Ark of Osiris. But at this stage of the game, in Ark of Osiris, you've got Ramses, and you've got Alexander the Great, and you've got Saladin all countering healing. There's just too many counters to healing right now for Richard to retain that S tier quality that he held before, so we bumped him down slightly to an S-. Overall, he's still quite strong. We did also slightly bump down El Cid. We had him as an S-. I mean, this is sort of moot. He's not meta right now anyways, but I thought A+ was more appropriate for him. And overall, these ratings haven't otherwise shifted around all that much. Your best bet is going to be, yet again, Artemisia primary Wu Zetian for defending against Attila Takeda, and you could use Artemisia Yi Song in order to try to control the field more, but I think it does suffer significantly against Attila Takeda, and in our own testing, my Attila Takeda beat that combo pretty significantly and consistently. And if you want, you could also go with Charles Martel Constantine. That will go even with Attila Takeda, or in fact, you can beat it if you've got either better gear or I'm told if you stack a boatload of health, but we really need to go and test that and show that off. So maybe I shouldn't have even said that out loud. Whatever, the rumors are out there. At least you know about them too. Let's talk about the final category, which is Canyon, and then we'll go into our overall ratings. First, let's cover our new entrants to Canyon, Artemisia and Ramses. We gave both of them an S-. I think that Ramses is solid if you are using his expertise skill to counter healing. I also like that he has some healing himself, but the real drawback of this commander in Canyon is that he doesn't have area of effect damage, and that is a real problem. In a similar vein, I love the area of effect damage that Artemisia brings to the table. The downside is that she really doesn't have much sustain here because she is harming herself in the process. So I like that she's doing good area of effect damage. I think she deserves the S-, but not any higher. Now, there were a couple commanders that we bumped up in our estimation of how good they are. That includes Charles Martel, who we had it as really an S-, but you look around at Canyon teams and he's in pretty much every one. I think he deserves the S. And in a similar vein, we did bump up slightly Guan Yu. It was an S-. You look around at top tier Canyon teams, Guan is in every single one of them. I'm going to give that S to Guan Yu and say he's really solid. You just need to make sure that you use him as a DPS related commander. Put him in the back lane. He cannot be in a position where he is tanking. We actually retained the S+ title on our Yi Song. Yi Song is just a monster. He completely changes the way the enemy has to play by virtue of this area of effect damage. And in Canyon, they set their defense and there's nothing they can do at that point to change how they counter it. So you can typically hit 4 targets with Yi Song's AoE. And this alone will dramatically change the effectiveness of your Canyon team. Otherwise, the ratings here remained roughly the same. We did slightly bump down Saladin from S to S-. We wanted these relative ratings to be more meaningful, and we didn't think he was quite at the same tier as the other commanders that are listed as an S. Let's go now to our overall ratings. The overall ratings are fun to look at. We'll put those up on the screen. It should be no surprise that YSG reigns supreme as a S+. He's so good defending your city, getting value on Barbarians, open field combat, hitting multiple enemies, using him to defend objectives, using him to rally objectives. This commander slices, dices, and freaking does it all, and he does it all very gracefully. I would highly recommend that every player invest in this commander, card up in the top for my investment order for legendaries, which starts with Yi Song as the first one, and it's not a coincidence. I bumped up substantially in my rating Attila and Takeda to the S tier. I was surprised and honestly astonished at the fact that they were still effective in open field combat. But I want to again point out that you have to use them with surgical precision. If you run them into a combat where they're taking area of effect damage, you're actually going to get kind of wrecked. We slightly bumped down our rating of Saladin. He was S tier before. Now I'd say he's S-, as healing starts to become less prevalent in Rise of Kingdoms for defending structures and cities, and even in Ark of Osiris. And as I lean on my own experience using this commander in open field combat, I felt like he was good, but just not astonishing or exceptional, and I feel like the S- is a better fit, especially when you compare to the other commanders we have at S. One of those commanders we have at the S tier, who's a new entrant, is Artemisia. She deserves it. She's a counter to Attila Takeda, and that is worthy of that S quality answer. In addition, I put Ramses as an S-. I feel like Ramses was really, really good for rallying stuff, and he also was pretty good in Canyon, but not exceptional. I think he's good in the open field. If I had had him expertise, I really would have loved to have used him in the Ancient Ruins and Altars of Darkness, because so many people bring infantry, and I was told that he was just obliterating folks. I think it's possible even that he might be as good as Attila Takeda. You use your Ramses Yi Song. You just got to be a little careful because they don't have quite as much march speed to move around, but that could be very, very powerful. The only other major change that we made is we did bump down our overall rating of Khan from an S- to an A+. And I know for folks that have invested in Khan, that might be a little disappointing, but I think the reality is that his role as a rally leader has diminished. And he does get value that's really not represented in the categories that we evaluate here, as I mentioned before, in ballads and all those other game modes like Ceroli Assault, where he's quite strong, just not good in the categories that we looked at here. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of this tier list, and you should definitely subscribe if you're always interested in getting the latest and greatest straight from my brain to yours on what we think the Rise of Kingdoms meta will look like. This was all based off of our experience that was extensive from KvK Season 4. We'll put a card up in the top. If you want to check out that playlist, you can see exactly what happened and what we're talking about. All of these commanders, we've got them in use on the battlefield, or we observe them on the battlefield, and you can see exactly how they perform. Until next time, my friends, you have fun smashing the kingdom.